Good afternoon, everybody. If it's Thursday afternoon, it must be Thursday night football. And here to help you guys break it down and see what we've got, I am Scott the Steehn, Steehn, and I am joined, as always, by my partner in crime there in Atlanta, Georgia, Mr. Joe Duffy. Joseph, how's it going today?
It's going well, Scott. And yeah, and I hope people get used to this. Every single Thursday at 1:30 Eastern Time, we're going to give them great information. Set your clock by it, but, of course, you can watch it on demand afterwards as well.
That's right. That's right. It's a pretty quick burn, Joe. It's not one of those videos that's going to get, a million views over a week. You got about a 7-hour window here to watch the video and to get down. So there you go. But we always like to give you guys the up-to-date injury information, who's in, who's out, who's going to be playing terribly, and who's going to be playing well. Joey had a interesting Giants-Cowboys game last week as it landed right on 5. So depending on where you got that number, you're either happy, you're sad, you're somewhere in between. How'd you end up? You do okay?
Yes, I actually swept last Thursday, had a good week overall. Sunday wasn't fantastic, but had a good week overall. Got a little lucky with that missed field goal at the end. But yeah, that's one of the things. If you'll notice at Winners and Whiners, I usually release my plays early because more times than not, I'm going to be on the right side of the line moves. I'm not going to tell you that every professional gambler out there is a client of mine. There are quite a few that are heavy hitters, but I will tell you that we pros are using a lot of the same metrics. I use a lot of computer systems, and some of the biggest syndicates out there are using very similar systems or the same systems I do. That's one of the many reasons I try to get those plays out as early as possible. And I do have a big weekend portfolio already up at Winners and Whiners, by the way.
Do you have the tagline yet? Rich man's portfolio at everyman prices?
No, but I am. As soon as we get off of here, I think I'm going to go copyright that.
That's yours, my friend. That's all you. Okay. So tonight, Joe, we've got a battle in the suddenly entertaining NFC South. Everybody is a contender except for the Carolina, but that's kind of the way that goes. But we're going to try to separate a little wheat from the chaff here this evening as Tampa Bay heads to the Mercedes-Benz Dome to take on the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta currently sitting as a 1.5-point favorite. The total on this game as of right now is 43.5. Does that match up with what you've got, buddy?
Yes, it is. And of course, it did open at 3-44 on that look-ahead line. And like I said, I like to look at the look-ahead. I like to use the look-ahead lines as power ratings. So that's pretty significant. And I think we've talked about it here. And I know I've talked about it on some other videos I've done with Winners and Whiners. And people have been with me for decades know that I always like contrarian information. I don't bet it religiously, but in the past few years, I've been weighing it more heavily, and for the fairly obvious reasons. As sports betting becomes more and more legal, you got more squares out there that are betting, and contrarian information way back in the early, in last century, where you had to work a little harder to get it, but you always betting against Joey Bag of Donuts was a good idea. Then the gambler got a little bit sharper, but thanks to legalization and the SCOTUS ruling, we now have a lot more squares back there. So I like contrarian information and really have fairly strong contrarian plays on both the side and the total. 75% of bets, 86% of the money is on Tampa. Now, that's especially notable because the public generally does like to bet favorites. Of course, this is very close to a pick 'em. And then when you're talking about the road team is getting 2.5 or less, the odds makers are implying that the road team, of course, is better. So it is pretty significant that the public is betting on a underdog, albeit a small underdog, and 80% of the bets and 75% of the handle are on the over. Now, I do have, all kinds of stats like I always do. Some of them will use, some of them I don't use. Unders have been a pretty big play on primetime games, 78 and 49, I think it is, if I memorize that correctly. Including all primetime games. Now, that does make sense. It's not necessarily totally coincidental because the bookmakers do have to shade it a little bit more towards the over. The public loves betting primetime games, and the public loves betting overs. Look, we all know, whether you're a pro gambler, whether you're a Joey Bag of Donuts, whether you're betting $5, $5,000, of course, it's more fun. It's a lot easier to root for the over, which is why the public loves betting the over. And not so coincidentally, it's why some of my top systems in every sport, but college and the NFL, very high on the list, where many of my best systems are under systems.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You will find that NFL lines especially are always going to be shaded a half point or a point towards the over because that's where the public money comes in. I personally, Joe, I've never had that problem. I root just as hard for 3 and outs and punts from the 30-yard line, field position games. I have just as much interest, have just as much fun betting an under as I do betting an over, and usually because I'm cashing. But I know that's not the general attitude of the public, and there's a reason why the public gets frustrated with betting, and Vegas keeps building bigger and bigger hotels. So fading the public, never a bad idea.
No, that's true. And, Roxy Roxburgh is one of the, or Roxy Roxburgh. I call him Roxburgh. I actually live on a street called Roxburgh. But Roxy Roxburgh, of course, one of the most famous odds makers ever. And one of his quotes that are so true, he always said, don't handicap the teams, handicap the lines. And that is true with both the side and the total. And fortunately, like I said, I'll admit, I don't know the personnel as well as a lot of other handicappers, as well as a lot of other fans out there. But I definitely know how to handicap the lines, and that's why I love using software. And we are exploiting, my software basically does just that. It exploits lines that are shaded, and not always, but usually towards the favorite, and then usually towards the over. So in many cases, I'm betting the underdog and the under, although I've had quite a few favorites this year.
All right, well let's talk about this one. Let's dive into this game just a little bit. Buccaneers and the Falcons. What do you like about these two teams? What don't you like?
Well, I do think the Falcons certainly have an upside. They obviously have Kirk Cousins as the quarterback. He's been so-so this year. It's been a little bit of an adjustment. Kyle Pitts, people here in Atlanta, they don't know what to make of him. He's a guy that's got phenomenal talent. And look, a lot of fans were saying as an excuse, he didn't have anybody who could throw him the ball. Remember that last year's starting quarterback couldn't even make the number 3 quarterback for Arizona. So he finally has someone who can get in the ball, but Pitts hasn't really gotten a lot of separation this year. Still, you would think between a mega talented tight end and a quarterback who I think could be a little bit overrated still, though. He's at least like a top 10, top dozen quarterback. The Falcons, I think, offense is capable of a lot more. But look, Baker Mayfield on the other side of the ball, or on the other side of the line, or the other sideline, he's really maybe the poster child of sometimes you got to be patient with your quarterbacks. Mayfield has finally settled in, and he is at least an upper half, and maybe even, maybe just a notch below, and who knows, he's kind of trending upwards. He could possibly be the better of the 2 quarterbacks. So, these are 2 decent teams. Tampa Bay has been predictably unpredictable over the years. They've generally done pretty well as an underdog, but, it's going to be about play calling tonight. A lot of times, and I think one of the reasons that Thursday night games go under, teams, they can't be all that creative and have too many new wrinkles in their offense. In Tampa Bay, especially, they're going to be out their number 3 and 4 receivers. You can see how they're going to be quite conservative in their play calling tonight. With their new offense coordinator, they've been calling safer plays this year anyway. They're throwing the ball a lot closer to the line of scrimmage, and I think, tonight should be a lot more of the same.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it there. They're going to be without Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer. Two pretty good weapons there for Baker Mayfield. And yeah, to speak to that, Baker Mayfield having a heck of a season, still completing over 70% of his passes, 8 TDs on the season, just 2 picks. And you're right. His yards per attempt, 7.6, not a bad number, but it's not elite, and it does speak to what you're talking about throwing shorter possession passes and letting your talented receivers kind of chew up that yak, get that yards after catch. That makes the quarterback look really good on the stat sheet. Joe, the matchup that I'm looking at here is this Buccaneers run defense. And, it's been a pretty storied unit for the last 5 years or so, but they're having some real problems this year with their run defense. And I think that, the fact they're 29th in yards per carry allowed, I think this is a great opportunity for Atlanta to pound the ball. They've got Robinson and Algier, sustain drives, and basically do their best to keep Baker and the Bucs offense off the field. Falcons, their run game has been kind of inconsistent, but it's kind of been dictated on who they played. They didn't run well against Pittsburgh or Kansas City, both those teams have top 8 rush defenses, but when they face softer units in Philadelphia and New Orleans, they went for 5.4 yards per carry against Philly and 5.9 against New Orleans. Not coincidentally, those 2 games are the 2 games they've won this season. I'd look for them to try to exploit the weakness in the Bucs' run defense. What do you say?
It's true. Now, Tampa Bay, of course, is without Winfield, one of their better safeties, so there might be a little bit reason to put the ball in the air. And Robinson can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's another guy that, Falcons fans are certainly hoping will be able to rise to the occasion now that he's got a quarterback that can get the ball to him, now that he's got a quarterback that can keep the ball honest. But, yeah, he's one of those guys that seems to have an upside that his talent, at least thus far, is a little bit more than his production has been. But yeah, I can definitely see Atlanta keeping the ball on the ground. And again, gets back to what I said, that a lot of times on Thursday nights, on the short weeks, more times than not, teams are playing a little bit more conservative offense anyway. So you can see how that, a lot of the over props when it comes to the number of carries and even the number of yards might be something to look at when it comes to the Falcons for sure.
Yeah, this Tampa Bay team is 3-1. They've got a couple nice wins. They've got a road win over Detroit. They beat Washington in week 1. Of course, I don't know if we talked about it or not, but there's a serious trend about fading rookie quarterbacks in the first game on the road. They very, very rarely do well, and that was the case before the Commanders kind of figured it out on offense and have really kind of become a force to be reckoned with, at least on that side of the ball. But then there's this clunker at home, losing 26-7 to Denver. They did bounce back and beat Philly last week, but I don't want to be the one to break the bad news to everybody. I think Philly may be a pretty bad football team. What are you impressed with this Tampa Bay team, or is it just kind of iron pyrite, fool's gold, if you will?
Yeah, they totally dominated, especially in the first half against Philadelphia last week. And, there's obviously the Eagles, they may not have their coach and their quarterback on the same page. Sirianni, a couple of years ago, he leads them to the Super Bowl, and now they're ready to get rid of him. And same thing, Jalen Hurts, 2 years ago, you would have said he's the second best quarterback in the NFL. Now you're wondering if he's towards the middle. But I think they're going to be one of those teams that'll be predictably unpredictable. Tampa Bay, I think they're essentially a 500 team, but you did kind of set me up a little bit for one of my better systems. As a handicapper, one of the things that you have to do is continue to learn from your mistakes. And I think one of the biggest adjustments I've made over the years from when I got started, before there was all this computer software, I became a professional full-time handicapper in '88 and was handicapping on my own before that for my own personal profit. But I used to outsmart the room. I used to be a big splits guy where I would say, this team, they're really good at home, and this other team, they're really bad on the road. And it's either the home team's a small home favorite or even an underdog. I'd bet the home team. No. And then I found out in the NBA and the NFL, the 2 sports I used to like to bet that in the most, it wasn't doing as well as I thought. It wasn't doing as well as I sounded. Now, of course, we got computer software that keeps getting better and better. This is only Tampa's second road game, but they are 1-0, while Atlanta's 1-2 at home straight up. But I do have what I call an anti-splits angle. When you're fading a road team that has a significantly better road winning percentage than the home team does the home winning percentage, the home team is actually 116, 68, and 8, and that would favor Atlanta. And yes, it does work even with a small sample size. And NBA is about a month, less than a month away. Yes. I'm going to be exploiting that big time in the NBA. But my anti-splits angle is definitely one of the biggest changes I've made, when I realized I was 100% wrong, smart enough to no longer make that mistake. So the fact that Atlanta has been pretty bad at home and Tampa's been pretty solid on the road, contrary to what a lot of people may think, that actually makes Atlanta a pretty good play, because I found that splits very rarely hold up in sports.
Okay, very good. And I will say, in Atlanta's defense, they've faced 3 pretty tough opponents there at home. They start off with Pittsburgh and their defense. Then they get the Chiefs, a game they certainly could have won had things gone a little differently there towards the end of the game. And then last week, of course, they did get their victory, their lone home victory over what had been a pretty dynamic offense of the New Orleans Saints. So I don't hate your angle. I think there's a case to be made for that. Just out of the blue, Joe, who's a better team, Tampa Bay or New Orleans?
Tampa Bay and New Orleans, I really think Tampa Bay is. Look, I wasn't a big believer in New Orleans. I know they look like world beaters in the first 2 weeks, and that's going to happen. Sometimes it happens. I mean, yeah, they look like they were going to be one of the most prolific offenses. You had to check and see if Drew Brees was back there, but no, I don't think there's any question that the Saints early in the year were a little bit of an aberration. Of course, they came real close. It took about a 55-yard field goal to beat them last week. But I think all in all, Tampa Bay is probably the better team. Look, I got my cheat sheets. I could see how some of the power ratings I subscribe to say, but I do think that Tampa is probably the better team. And most importantly for last week, and that's another case where talk about line shopping. I did get the Falcons early in the week at I think like 1.5, and it closed at 2.5 or 2. So it depends on where you got it. But now there was no doubt in my mind that New Orleans was grossly one of the more overvalued teams in all my years of handicapping after 2 weeks.
All right, and yeah, that is a good update. I had yesterday's number on there. That has gone to 2.5, by the way. Falcons money has come in on that and driven that line to 2.5. All right, buddy. Well, this is the time where the rubber meets the road. I know you've got some premium plays on this game, and I have a premium play on the total. But I will talk about the side. I'm going to tilt towards the Falcons in this one, laying the 2.5. I think that the rushing game is going to be the difference. I don't know what's happened to this Tampa Bay run defense, but it is definitely not the same unit that it was in years past. I think the Atlanta Falcons will be able to move the ball successfully. And like you said, without them having Winfield back there and Cousins, as long as they respect the run game, Cousins will have time to throw. I think he's going to be able to pick some spots and make a few passes downfield. So I'll lay the number with the Falcons. What do you got?
Yeah, well, it's ironic, Scott. I think this is the third time we've done this. We didn't do it the first week, but each of the last 2 weeks I had both the side and total, including sweeping last week. This time I do have the side plus 2 college football sides. And by the way, the 2 college football sides, ironically enough, it's a system that hasn't applied all year. It's a fantastic system, and it applies twice tonight. But I do have the side, but I'm going to give you a free play on the total, and it is on the under. Some of the reasons that I mentioned, I do think there is a logical reason why primetime games tend to go under, especially when you're talking about on a short week. Also, a few systems here, and this is one, I trade systems and buy systems from people. I will admit this one's a little backfitted, which is why that despite the pure numbers are pretty impressive, I didn't use it as a premium play, falls just below that medium range total. Both teams off a win. One is a win as a dog, the other one as a win as a favorite. Both teams off of a cover. It's going under 62, 33, and 4. But in the name of full disclosure, the last 3 years, it's been a little bit so-so. Plus, we talked about, as far as what I like to call the organic handicapping, we know Tampa's without a couple of their weapons, their number 3 and number 4 wide receiver. They have been a lot more conservative this year with their new offensive coordinator. I don't think there's any reason for Atlanta to get all that fancy. I think they want to work some of their weapons in. Robinson's banged up. He is going to play. He said he's fine. He wasn't practicing this week. So again, when a couple of your better players, skill position players especially, miss practice because they were banged up, even though they're going to play, even tougher to throw in some wrinkles. So I'd be really surprised if either one of these teams comes out and surprises you by being a lot more aggressive, whether it's snapping the ball early in the play count or whether it's throwing the ball downfield more than we expected. That would definitely catch me off guard. So as tough as it is to root for the under, I'm going to give an official free play on the under tonight.
All right, very good. Under 43.5. I've got the Falcons laying 2.5. Hey, between the two of us, you got both plays. So, like I said, if you want to get a premium plays, I do have an absolute banger of a college play that I love going tonight as well. So check those out. Joe's got a package put together. Make sure you check that out. You can find all that information there at winnersandwhiners.com. Just go to the experts tab and click on each individual name. You'll see everything that we've got locked and loaded there for tonight. Joe, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I do think if there is a favorite prop bet that I do have, and again, these lines move, but Cade Otton for Tampa over 28.5 receiving yards. I already alluded to it. Tampa, they're throwing a lot more safe passes. He is, of course, their tight end, and minus their number 3 and 4 receiver. I think he's going to be a major target tonight. I think he will fit into their passing game, their game plan big time. And I would even, take a look at the over as far as receptions are concerned as well. But yeah, Otten for Tampa, I think, is a pretty good over on most of the props, but officially over the 28.5 receiving yards.
Okay, very good. And I'll throw one out there as well. I've been touting Bucky Irving as a running back there for Tampa for the last 3 weeks of the season, and they have started to give him more carries. I think that he's got a total tonight of 44.5 yards. I think he's going to get more carries than White last week. Right now they stand. Rashard White has 6 more carries than Bucky Irving, but most of those came early. Last couple of games, Irving has actually had more attempts. I think Bucky Irving keeps it going tonight and goes over that total 44.5 yards. So there's my free prop for you as well. There's a little bonus. What about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I believe, physically speaking, White is the bigger of the two guys. And my theory on a short week, maybe they would give it to the the guy who's a little bit bigger. But we definitely agree it's going to be some conservative play call. Both guys could certainly go over the total when it comes to carries and yards. Because, like I said, I'd be shocked if there's any aggressive play calling in, if anything, especially from Tampa.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's it. That's our breakdown of tonight's Buccaneers Falcons game. Thanks very much for joining us. Special thanks to everybody that joined us live. Although whenever you join us, we love to have you. If you have any comments, make sure you drop those in the comment section. Let us know what you're playing. Let us know what you think of our breakdown. And the most important thing, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you ring that bell, because that way you get notified if next Thursday comes and it's 1:30 and you're like, oh crap, I was supposed to, and it'll be over. So ring the bell. Get notified every time we go live and every time brand new content comes up. All right. You guys have a terrific weekend. Let's kick it off strong tonight with a couple of wins, one in college, one in the NFL, and we'll just roll downhill from there. For myself, for Joe Duffy, for everybody here at winnersandwhiners.com, we appreciate you guys watching. Have a terrific day. Have a great weekend. You're almost to Friday, baby. Hang in there one more day. And let the winning begin. We'll see you guys next week. Take care.